Hello, everybody. How are you today? I'm so excited you could join us. I'm Michelle Costin. I'm with Elite Educational Enterprises, and I will be presenting information about child abuse and neglect and prevention strategies. I'm so excited again that you can join us. Please feel free to put comments, questions. We will be looking at those as well. I want to make sure that this opportunity this evening is helpful and reinforces what you know about preventing and seeing anything that could be suspected abuse or neglect. So, child abuse and neglect prevention, but also some identification. So, we'll be looking at what are things that we could look for. This information that I'll be sharing on the slides is proprietary information from Elite Educational Enterprises. And please do not download the copies to use for your own presentations, but I hope this information is very useful for you. I hope that by the end of our training and throughout, you'll be able to define what is child abuse and neglect. What are the different types of abuse and common factors in young children that you need to be on the lookout for? And also, how do you report? Are you aware of your reporting requirements? So, what do you know about child abuse and neglect? Have you had to report before? Are you new to the business and you weren't really sure that this would be a part of your job requirement working with young children in a licensed facility? Please put in the comments, what do you know about abuse? What do you want to know about child abuse and neglect? How to report it? What are the requirements? What does minimum standards say? What are the policies that are at your location? Maybe you own a school. Is it in your family handbook as well as your educator's handbook as well? And at the end of this, we might not have a chance to chat, but I hope so. Again, put comments and questions, and we'd love to get to those as well. So, child abuse and neglect, prevention, and looking for the signs. So, what is abuse and neglect? It's maltreatment of children. So, it can be the mistreatment, an attack, something that causes harm to another individual. Neglect is the failure of the parent or guardians to properly care for and meet those basic needs of children under the age of 18. And there's estimated 3 million cases of abuse and neglect that are reported to investigative authorities. And remember, you are going to be hopefully really looking out and be a part of the reports because we know that many children and families go without services or being reported. Many of us are scared or frightened. So, what are the dynamics? There's three major risk factors for children. Might be an adult with a potential for committing abuse or neglect. The presence of a child who may be viewed as special, maybe they're getting a lot of extra attention. Family and environmental stressors. And some of that we forget to remind ourselves that environmental stressors also mean our licensed early child care programs. Are there stressors in our schools for children and for those that we work with? So we know positive discipline and guidance, right? Redirection, using phrases such as use your walking feet versus don't run. So discipline is to teach positive behaviors. And the rules, we focus on future behavior. What do we want to see? So that's why it's so important with children, even though it might be the 100th time you said not to run down a hall. Remember to follow up with the positive, follow up with what you want the children to do. Leave that thought in their minds. Sometimes we think of discipline as we can think of it as punishment, but it's really not. It's invoking the child's brain, the thinking brain, to learn a new behavior and to repeat the behavior that we want to see in the future. So discipline is guidance. It's being the disciple. Punishment, it does inflict suffering. That's really the root of that. So it can inflict suffering, make children feel bad about themselves, especially if they're being told no a lot. So they're trying to stop what you don't want them to do, but we need to leave with them with what we want them to do. And it really does evoke, instead of their thinking brain about what do I need to do when I go into the hall today? I need to use my walking feet. Punishment evokes invokes the emotional brain. It can make children fearful. They might be scared of what the consequence might be. Nobody wants to be told negative things over and over again. So just remember, that's why it's positive discipline and guidance, and that we need to be avoiding punishment to help children use their thinking brains. So, what are some types of abuse? So, there's physical abuse, there's neglect. So, physical abuse is anything that is harming a child. Pinching, pulling their hair, hitting them with a tool such as a belt or a brush, anything that causes an injury and a mark. And we have neglect. So, neglect is children aren't receiving their what they need to grow and develop physically and emotionally and mentally. So, neglect might be children that aren't being fed, or neglect can be it, going to bed without dinner, or it could be you were playing with your food, so their plate gets thrown away. Those are types of neglect. There's sexual abuse as well, and there's emotional abuse. And so, sexual abuse is anything that can be construed as touching a child's parts of their body without consent. And we think about the genital areas, um, kissing a child, even hugging a child. We want to make sure we're talking to children and saying, hey, can we have a hug? Emotional abuse as well, telling children that they're bad, that they're wrong, that um, they could be better, and then not giving them the tools, right? Being that disciple, offering the discipline, the guidance that they need to do better. So emotional abuse comes into play as well, where children, they kind of shut down. They maybe don't come to you and ask questions. Maybe they've heard you ask too many questions. How come you don't know that already? And we have to remember, every child develops at their own pace. And our job in this early childhood education field, in our licensed and registered centers and homes, is to provide the pathway, to show them the pathway, and provide as much repetition as you can think of, beyond maybe our capacity sometimes, so that children know, hey, you're on the right track. If you're not, let me help you get back on the track to help you grow up and be successful. So, what are some factors of child abuse? Well, let's look at that right now. So, remember, it's abuse as well, and that's physical, sexual, and emotional, and neglect, where children do not have what they need to be able to grow and develop it to their full potential. So, we have some characteristics of adults. Maybe they have a history of repeated fear, anger, or rejection, and that's something we're trying not to impart in the children. Um, an abuse, uh, an abusive adult might have low self-esteem, not very trusting. There could be some other factors, young, having children, early marriage, depression, maternal depression. I mean, we've heard about that, right? Harsh punishment and discipline as a child, that may be have been their upbringing as well. Impulsive, low tolerance for stress, and we know how stressful this particular profession can be. Children need us 100% of the time. Possibly some addictions as well. We say drugs and alcohol, or there's some other addictions that maybe are impacting the adults that are caring for children, so that they don't necessarily have the tools that they need. What about a child who's scapegoated? A child might be blamed for an adult's mistakes or wrongdoings or failures. And we need to look for those signs in our schools as well. Well, you did that wrong, and this is why I did that this way. Uh, so we just have to be looking for things like that in adults, but also in our educators. Telling children you made a mistake and it's all their fault. That's scapegoating a child and putting them as the center, and somehow they are responsible for adult feelings and adult responsibilities. Maybe a child's frequently out. Maybe they don't attend very often, and they might return, but you notice something different. They might be being abused by a caregiver, or family member or guardian. Children who are scapegoated by their caregivers can be fussy, hyperactive, frequently ill, that tummy ache we hear about sometimes, possibly intellectually delayed, and there might be some physical characteristics on a child who's being abused as well. Maybe they're always frowning, um, look a little glassy eyed, don't want to really pay attention, maybe a little introverted. And so those are some things we need to look for as well, which can look like very typical child development, a child who's quieter. We just want to be mindful of that quiet child as well, not always just the hyperactive children. So, what about family and environmental stressors? We have to remember family is all encompassing. It's not just the parents, it could be grandparents, cousins, chosen family. And what about environmental stressors? School can be an environmental stressor, home can be, and a lot of any other aspect that a child is involved with as well. So all individuals and families, communities face conflict from time to time. And we know that that can be a big stressor. And we don't always know that a conflict is occurring because families don't always tell us what's going on in their home. So, can we help them cope with stressful events even though we don't necessarily know what's going on? So, looking for some of those signs. How are families feeling? Are they withdrawn from us now as well, but they were outgoing with us before? And how can we support them without necessarily know what's going on? So, a lot of times in maltreatment cases, right, which could be neglect and even physical abuse, stress is often a precipitating factor, right? We're highly stressed. We don't necessarily have a cognitive capacity to answer all of the why questions that a 3-year-old would have, which are often they ask why about absolutely everything. We might not be able to deal with a cup of milk that got spilt over. And this is why it's so important to really look at the stressors that a family might be having, kind of looking at their demeanor, but also looking at that for educators as well, because this is a highly stressful profession. Because anybody who is charged with caring for other people's children for 8 to 10 hours per day, it can be very stressful. And that's okay. What are some things we can do to mitigate that stress and help reduce any cases that might occur in our own programs? And there might be actions or events that trigger a strong reaction. And we could go back and think about, how were you raised? What were some things that were okay in your household, and were not okay in your household? And are you bringing those into the school? And are they in direct inverse of what minimum standards expects? And this is why training can be so invaluable to help reduce the stressors that many educators and directors and owners may encounter. So, what about reporting? What are some of the requirements for reporting suspected abuse or neglect? Remember, you don't have to know if it occurred. You just have to, in your gut or in your mind, you think something's off and it could be abuse or neglect. You're a mandated reporter. And so remember, you don't have to do any investigation. You don't have to ask any questions. You just have to call that hotline or go online. You can also do it online and report what you suspect. So, protective measures for programs and the educators or teachers. So, what about for directors and owners? It's really important. Make sure you get cleared background checks before an employee is in your school. Hire individuals that have training. So, think about that. Are they coming to you with 2 years of training? Have they had their annual abuse and neglect training as well? Be mindful about contacting references. Now, I know that if you call other employers, there's not a lot of information they can share with you, but they can let you know, has this person been trained on abuse and neglect? What is your code of conduct? What do you have in minimum standards in your employee manual and your family manual? What does it state? How children are expected to be treated, how coworkers are expected to be treated, parents and the admin team. What is your policy on abuse or neglect? If it happens, are you letting that teacher go right away? Are you making sure you're reporting it? So this is really important as directors because licensing holds directors and owners responsible for this kind of information. And what about the educators and those that are caring for the children that in your schools? What are some signs of abuse, and we need to be attentive. So you may have done your pre-service training, you've oriented them, it's in all of your handbooks. They've even signed something, signed off saying, yes, they understand as a mandated reporter and what the requirements are about where they're supposed to report, where they can get that information. But we still need to remain attentive. We need to walk our schools. We need to be looking for things that are slightly off. There might be a teacher who's under a lot of stress, nothing to do with her job at the moment, but we know that stress is an indicator. Stress can be a factor in abuse. So be attentive. Assist your educators. Talk to them. Give them a break. Ask questions. If you're concerned about a child, and again, if you're concerned, you really should report that. But maybe you did secondhand information. Somebody told you something. Go by, be attentive, be present. Ask your educators, hey, how are things going? I'm here to support you. Same with your parents, because they're the caregivers as well. And we don't know what it looks like when they go home at night and before they get to us the next morning. So ask questions, see if they're available. Um, let them know about resources that you have collected already. And maybe there's a resource that could be very useful for a family who doesn't know who to call or who to reach out to. And again, reminder, we're all mandated reporters. If you've had a background check, your fingerprint cleared, you're working in a licensed or registered facility or home, you're mandated to report suspected abuse. You don't get to decide or have to decide if it is abuse or not. That's what the professionals are for. And they need us to use our eyes and ears and gut feelings if we're suspecting any kind of abuse towards a child. So definitely report. So just remember, with reporting, we also need to be mindful of showing our employees, new or veteran employees, about what the operational policies are. And one of the operational policies is number 26. Annually, employees must be trained. Because we know we need to increase employee awareness and parent awareness of issues regarding child abuse and neglect. What are the warning signs? There are some great posters. There is form that we need to put on our parent boards. But just remember, we need to do this and be reminders to not just our employees, but our families as well. How can you increase employee and parent awareness? Can you have a 30-minute class twice a year, maybe quarterly? It talks about what abuse and neglect looks like and what our role as owners, directors, and educators in the school, what our role is. How can you coordinate between your program and community organizations? And this is what's great about a resource file. You could have just a 3-ring binder with some resources in there. There might be some local agencies, maybe some therapists in the area that you could get their information. So at least you have kind of a few items that you could share with your families about, hey, if you're experiencing any stressors in your family, here's a phone number you can call. 211 is great as well. It's information, and they can say, hey, I'm experiencing stress in my family, and hopefully then that can help lead them to programs that could be assisting them as well. Actions that the parent of a child who is a victim of abuse or neglect should take to obtain assistance and intervention, including procedures for reporting child abuse or neglect. Now, remember, this needs to be included in your operational policies. This is the one I see is often missing, is this 26E, actions that the parent of the child should take as well. So we need to make sure that in there we also have information for the parents about where they can go, how can they get the support that their child's going to need long term. Another thing is when we're doing our orientation, even though we may have an employee that came in and they have 2 years experience, documented 2 years prior experience, this still needs to be part of that first day orientation. Now, you can take 1 or 2 or 3 days to go over an orientation, but it is paramount that during your employee orientation, even if they have 2 years prior experience, that you go over your employee policy about prevention, recognition, and reporting. They need to know, again, these trainings are very useful and helpful to do at least once a year. I'd recommend probably, twice a year. What are some factors? What are that indicate that a child might be at risk? What are some warning signs that a child might already be a victim? What are the procedures for reporting child abuse and neglect? Do they know where to find the phone numbers? Do they know where to locate the online abuse reporting as well? Do they know who to report to? Do they know who your licensing rep is and their telephone number and their email? Because that is part of information that needs to be included by our phones now. And what are some community organizations that have training programs available to employees, children, and parents? And this is part of the orientation. And where can we go to, have these conversations? Sometimes we don't speak of child abuse or neglect. We want to believe it's not going to happen. Well, we're caring for somebody's children. I would never do that. We need to make sure that we also have places to go, others to reach out to, so that we can maintain that integrity of caring for children and using positive discipline and guidance. And again, annually, every educator and director, I think owners should do this as well. They need to have at least 1 hour, clock hour of annual training hours that focus on prevention, recognition, and reporting of child maltreatment, which includes abuse and neglect. And again, we're going to go over them again. Factors indicating a child's at risk, warning signs they may already be a victim, procedures, how do we report? And then again, what are the community organizations? And hopefully within a year, you may have been able to add some more programs that are available to your employees, to the children that you're serving, and to the parents and families you are serving as well. So what is a mandated reporter? Well, that's you. Once you're working in a licensed and registered family child care home, you are now the professional who has regular contact with children, and you are now a mandated reporter. Now, mandated reporters are in other fields as well. Those working with the disabled, even disabled adults, those working with senior citizens, and other identified vulnerable populations. So there's many professions. Doctors, nurses that are mandated reporters to ensure that children and those that are vulnerable to abuse and neglect are looked out for. Mandated reporters are required to report whenever physical, sexual, other types of abuse have been observed or suspected. And financial abuse happens as well. And that could possibly be with children, definitely disabled persons, and senior citizens and other vulnerable populations. And remember, if there is evidence of neglect or you suspect evidence of neglect or abuse, knowledge of an incident, or you believe that somebody, a child in particular in this case, is at serious risk of harm, you're required to report. What if you have an employee and you have a coworker that is not being cared for correctly, or you believe they might be falling into one of these as well? You can also call 911, of course, but you're a mandated reporter. Somebody you know is being abused in your work environment in a licensed facility. So be mindful, check in with your coworkers, check in with families, check in with your admin teams, and vice versa. All right. And that slide was really talking about who's a mandated reporter. So doctors, pediatricians, therapists are mandated reporters. Childcare providers are mandated reporters. Anybody working with the elderly or working again with vulnerable populations. So just be mindful of that. So you can report. You can call the child abuse hotline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they have a toll free number. This should be located next to at least your front office phone. If your classrooms have phones that dial out, I would recommend putting this information there as well. There's also a website. So you can go to your internet browser, and here is the websites. And you can see this again in minimum standards. It asked all the same questions that an intake person would ask as well. And ensure that wherever you have your phone numbers, you are now required as of last year to ensure that your representative's full name and contact information is included amongst these phone numbers as well. And that includes their telephone number as well as their email. Now, you still have to report any suspected or you've seen abuse. You need to report it to the 1-800 number or via the website. You only have 48 hours to report. That includes the weekends. And that's why both of these opportunities to report are 24 hours, 7 days a week. So if you suspect abuse on Friday, you cannot wait till Monday. The second thing about reporting is that you, as the individual who suspects it, you are required to report. You can't tell your director and expect them to report. You can't ask a coworker to report it for you. And that is something that has changed over the past couple of years as well. Anyone who's suspecting it is required to report it. And it's really important for directors and owners to know as well. You cannot tell an employee that they have to report it to you first. That is against minimum standards. You need to remind your staff that they don't have to tell you, anybody in admin, they don't have to tell the owners, they don't have to tell anybody that they reported abuse. They are not required by law. If you want to ask, certainly you could ask, but it needs to be that you're just asking after the fact, not expecting to have a conversation prior. And many educators that I've had the pleasure of providing trainings were not aware of that. They thought it was okay to go report it to their directors first. Licensing made that very clear. So please make sure you utilize that information to report. So what do you know about child abuse and neglect now? And what are some things that you want to know? Have you looked at your employee manual in a while? What about your parent manual? Are all those phone numbers and contact information by at least your office phone that an employee could get to right away? Is there a place where they could make a call or a report in private? Do they have access to a computer? Do they need to take a break and do it on their phone? As far as I know, it is available to do on a mobile device, but it is still highly recommended that you utilize a PC or some other kind of computer program. So anything, will a parent know if I report? That is a great question. So not initially, but because we are mandated reporters, we are required to give our first and last name, and they will ask, of course, what center you're working at. So if licensing feels an investigation is necessary, they will start investigating. They don't automatically say, "Oh, it was reported by Michelle and what day she called on." That information would come out if the investigation went on further, required court and etc. Then yes, your name would come out in that information, which I know can scare people. But remember, as a mandated reporter, you are okay to report. You are not going to get in trouble, even if it says there is no abuse, and that is the report. You're not going to get in trouble for reporting. Do you have to tell your director? Absolutely not. You never have to tell your director. You never have to tell it, coworker, your family, nobody. So you never have to tell them before, during, or after the fact. And yes, something popped up as well, TP, that yes, you need to make sure that you have your licensing rep. Yep. Rep info is absolutely required. Their first and last name, their telephone number, and on their card, they always leave their cell phone number as well as their email address. You don't have to report it to them. You just need to ensure that you're reporting it to those two lines, but you can certainly send an email. And anytime you, as an educator, as an owner, as a director, have a question for licensing, you are allowed to reach out to your representative. If you're not sure about something, um, you can absolutely reach out. Yeah, you don't have to tell the director or the owner or anyone in your admin team. Well, I know this and thank you, everybody. It's been so wonderful having you here this evening. I hope that this was a part of your annual training and you felt like maybe you understood all of the requirements, and hopefully the questions that I answered today help you move forward in understanding what your responsibilities are being a mandated reporter. And thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.